Hey everyone, welcome back to Quality Decoded. Today I'm going to talk about building a backend for your front end for Angular developers. That's the BFF pattern if you've never heard of it, backend for front end. And I say this is kind of specific for Angular developers, although technically anybody can learn from this and use this technology that I'm going to be showing you to build APIs for any framework, any front end framework. It could be used with React if you want, it doesn't matter. But the framework I'm going to use specifically is called NestJS, and it is inspired heavily by Angular. So Angular developers will really feel at home in this framework. So that's really the point, I guess, that I'm trying to get across. Let's go ahead and dive into this. So you'll see some information about it here. It's a progressive Node.js framework for building efficient, reliable, scalable server-side applications. Got a cute little kitty here. I love cats, so that makes me love this framework even more. If you click documentation, you can see their documentation here. There's all kinds of stuff. When I was first learning the framework, I went through and read everything here in the documentation, and I learned a lot. But when you kind of try to take in that much information at once, you obviously miss things. So I'm constantly going back and finding new tidbits that I missed the first time, and I'm learning a lot. But before we go too deep into NestJS, let's talk a little bit more about that BFF pattern and what is it for? What's the importance of that pattern? So here you see a JSON placeholder API, and it has a list of posts, and there's 100 of them. And then if you go to / post number like 99, you get just that post number. And we're going to be using this API from our BFF. Well, one of the concerns that you might have first out is you could just call this from your Angular app. There's no reason for a BFF. Why the extra complexity, the extra layer, the extra thing that has to be managed and monitored and scaled? Why would you do this? Well, it's not always necessary. But what if your API had some kind of authorization in front of it, and your users themselves wouldn't have access, but you do? You need to be able to, authenticate with your service. There are ways to build proxies and stuff like that to do this for you, but there's other benefits in addition to kind of being an interface for authorization. You also might want to aggregate data from multiple sources, multiple APIs. Maybe there's 5 different APIs that you need to call on a single page of your UI. And this pattern will allow you to aggregate all of that data in a single network request and return it back to your Angular or any front-end application. That's valuable, having a single request, because there's mobile traffic is growing and growing and growing. It's only going to get bigger, and people on mobile devices, you don't know how reliable their connection is. There's people I know who even in their own house have pretty bad connections with their mobile device. They could be going under a bridge. They could be going through a tunnel. They could be in a more remote location driving and looking at your website. And so if you have to make 5-6 different requests from your website, there's all these points of potential failure, whereas one request goes through, comes back with just the data that it needs, and it's more likely to be successful. Plus, there's data here user ID I might not care about. Body, when I'm showing recent posts, I wouldn't care about body. So, you can really formulate the data to be exactly what the UI wants. I could go a lot deeper. I could probably have an entire discussion just on the BFF pattern. So I think that's enough for now to give you a high-level overview of why I like it. I will say I want my BFFs to be super simple. They're not going to have they're not going to have any business logic. They shouldn't have very much logic at all. Most of them tend to be pretty simple. A couple of files, for each endpoint to reach out to a HTTP service, do some mapping, and return it in a controller. So pretty simple stuff, and we'll see all that here momentarily. So back to Nest, you can see here on the website how to install it. Just npm install -g to do it globally. NestJS CLI. The NestJS CLI is pretty much a copy of the Angular CLI with just different, schematics. So in Angular, you can do ng new app. You can do the same thing with Nest. You can do Nest new app. Matter of fact, while I'm talking, let's go ahead and do that so that it's done. So let's do Nest new demo API. And so while that's going, There's in Angular you would do ng g component, demo, but in Nest you would do like Nest G controller demo. So Nest has controllers, services, lots of other things you can see over here in the list, but you can generate pretty much anything that you need using the CLI. So let's go ahead and go into that. I'm going to go ahead and start it up. So you can just do npm start. I'm actually going to do npm run start dev. This will just have it do a file watch, so that as I make changes, it automatically reloads and I don't have to worry about it. And let's just make sure that's working. Yep, we got hello world. Let me go ahead and make all these bigger because I'm on a big screen, so it might look small. And that looks good, yeah. All right, so we got a demo app created. It's running. I'm going to go ahead and open up the code. And then we can dive into the code here momentarily. I just want to point out, anything you want to do, you can go search here on their website and try to figure out if there's a way to do it. There's things I find out all the time that like I'm kind of reinventing the wheel, and the framework kind of supports something automatically. So definitely don't forget to check that out. So we're going to do basically a post module, and we're going to have a controller, service, a mapper, DTO, and an interface. And I kind of want to explain the role that each file has in the process. I'm just going to ignore all the like general stuff that came with it. We're not going to use the app controller or the app service. Normally I would just delete those if you don't need them, but I'll keep them for now. So let's go ahead and generate some of those files that we need, and I'll talk about what they're going to be. So the controller will be the first thing. So your controller in Nest is what takes in the request and returns back the response. So every endpoint in the API is going to have a controller. You can have multiple endpoints in each controller. I like to essentially follow a single responsibility pattern and make sure that they're separated. So you could have all your controllers in like one big file. But if you've got posts and then you've got comments, you'd probably have a post module and a comments module that do all that. And speaking of that module, I need to delete this real quick and update my app module because I made a mistake. If this isn't obvious, this is not rehearsed. This is not scripted. I'm just kind of doing this on the fly. So if I make mistakes, I apologize. But I'll try to keep this as quick as I can, maybe under 30 minutes. We'll see. But I want a module, not just a controller. So the module, just like in Angular, this is a way to like modularize your code and have things that are common kind of be combined together. So all my post-related stuff is going to go in my post module. So now when I generate my post controller, it should actually go on the post module instead of the app module. Let me just double check that I did that correctly. And yep, you'll see the post controller is here. I have some formatting quirks that I like to do. You don't have to follow all that stuff. But if you see me doing some weird changes, that's all I'm doing. So the controller takes in the request, returns the response. We're going to need a service. I'm actually going to rename this service after it generates, but I'll tell you why. This is going to be our mapper. There's no way to generate a mapper. That's just my own personal like pattern that I use for these things. So there's not like a mapper schematic, but I'm going to call this the PostMapper. So I got to do some renaming. And let's go ahead and rename it. Let's do this the right way. Rename symbol. All right, that updated the symbols, but there's still this text here. Okay, perfect. All right, so we have a PostMapper. That's going to basically transform the format, the interface or the contract that I have with my upstream service into the one I want to send to my downstream UI, or that might be reversed. Either way, I'll show you more about that here momentarily. Let's create a new class for the post DTO. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more renaming for this one because I like to put my DTOs in a file with .dto. Oh, and I've put it in the wrong spot. Move that up. All right. So I'm just turning the hyphen into a dot, and then I'm going to rename it to post DTO because it's actually going to only talk about a single post, not multiple. Okay, so we've got our DTO. That'll be our contract to the UI. And then we need an interface, which is going to define the contract with our service that we call, which is the post service. So I'm going to call it a post interface. And again, I keep putting things in the wrong folder. That's okay. You can just move it. And this again is going to be singular, even though it's in the posts file. It's going to be called post. And it's just complaining because that's an empty interface. No big deal. And what else do we need? So we got controller, we got DTO, we got mapper. I think we need the actual real service, the one that I renamed earlier. So let me generate that. And let me take a look at the module. I might have screwed something up here by renaming that mapper. Nope, it worked good. Okay, so we got controller, DTO, service. This will be what reaches out and does the HTTP request, our module, our mapper. So I think that's all we'll need. So we'll start with that. So all we've done at this point is just generate a bunch of files. You've seen all the commands I've ran. I haven't done anything special. So now we're actually going to start building out the API. So one of the things I'll work on first will just be the interface and the DTO. And this is pretty simple because we have the API available right here. This is our interface. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy that. And in my interface file, I'm going to paste it just for reference. So I can see we have user ID and it's a number. We've got ID and it's a number. Title's a string. And I know body's a string. I'm super weird and like to alphabetize my elements. So bear with me. All right, so our post has got body, ID, title, user ID. Now, we're going to have essentially the same thing on our DTO that's going to go back to our front end, except we don't care about user ID, so we're going to take that off. And body is going to be optional because we wouldn't want body. Oh, I don't want to do that. We're not going to actually want body on like our recent posts or our list of posts. We only want that when we actually get the full-blown post. So I'm going to make all these public since this is a class. In NestJS, you use classes for your DTOs. And you can use some cool stuff with like class validator and class transformer to automatically like morph incoming objects from the user into like a DTO. And then if you want to have like getters and setters or other types of methods like get title instead of accessing it directly, it'll have those methods available. Super cool. But because of those functionalities that I'm typically using, I follow this habit, even though this could just be an interface. It doesn't have to be a class. There's also some cool stuff I'm not showing here about integration with Swagger in NestJS, where it can automatically generate your Swagger docs and your Swagger UI, and it's really cool to use, but it's just a little bit outside of the scope, I think, of what I'm trying to show you here, which is more about how the framework works and the value I think it provides. So maybe I'll show that in another video another time. So we have our DTO, and we have our interface. So I think we can actually work on our controller now and just try to mock it out just to see if we can get a response like that we want. In NestJS, this decorator here called controller, this is what defines the endpoint. So it'll be /posts. And then on your methods, you have to define that it's a get endpoint. And then you could have like posts/recent if you want that. For now, I'm just going to do recent posts. So I'm just going to leave it blank. I'm not going to bother with the pagination and all that kind of stuff that you would normally need. Because it's just too much complexity to do in like a short time frame, and I don't think it's necessary. Again, maybe I'll have a deeper dive at some point to show that. But we're going to have a get endpoint. We're going to call it get recent posts. I always like to be explicit about my visibility, so I always put public just for my personal preference. There won't need to be any input parameters. And one of the cool things about Nest is you can return so many different types. You can pretty much return anything. So you can return an observable from this method and it'll work. It'll automatically subscribe to the observable, get the response, return it to the user. You can return a promise, or you can return the string, whatever you want. It'll work just fine. So this is going to be a post DTO. And we're going to return, let's just do of as post DTO. And let's just give it some mock data to make sure it's working. All right. So if I did this correctly, and who knows if that's the case, we should be able to get to our post endpoint. There we go. We got ID1 title. So it's working. So our controller, good to go. We're getting our recent posts. Now we can actually work on, let's say, pulling from the actual service to begin with. So let's go to our service. And just like you have in Angular, you're going to have to import like an HTTP module and then use the HTTP service to actually make the call. I think in Angular it's called HTTP client. Here it's called HTTP service. But yeah, the first thing I'm going to need to do is go ahead and import HTTP module so that I'll have that dependency available to my service. And then I'm going to, import that here as HTTP. And then we're going to have our get recent posts here, which is going to return an observable. And this is where it's actually going to return the post. Now, this is, again, a personal preference type thing. You might want to have your service just return your DTO. That way your controller is super simple and it's just calling the service and returning whatever the service responds with. Personally, I like to have my services be built in the context of the HTTP service that they're calling, with the idea that in the future, maybe that service will provide a client SDK. So like they'll provide this post service to me. And if they ever do that in the future, it's going to be with their contract. So it's trying to make the code a little bit more future proof. And when I build services, I like to provide those SDKs. So I just stay in that habit, but you don't have to do it this way. You can kind of combine the code that I'm going to place in the controller, and you could put that here to do like some mapping. But again, we're just going to return the interface from the upstream service. So that's going to be this HTTP get. This is just using Axios under the hood, if you notice that here. So get, we need to tell it it's going to be a post. Don't confuse the word post with the HTTP method of post. But this is saying it's going to be of a type post is going to be the response. And then we just need that URL. Let's just go grab that. This thing right here. All right. And this is going to complain because observable Axios response post is not assignable to observable post. So this is one thing I will do in the service is I'll do a pipe since this is an observable and map. And the first time I import map, it never wants to show up. So let me just do it manually. What are they called? Operators. Okay. So Axios just returns a data property with the actual response. So I'm just going to go ahead and disable prettier because I don't agree with it right now and I don't feel like configuring it. But this is the format that I like to use. So I pipe it and I return back the response data. So now I'm getting back an observable post. And I should be able to use that in my controller because technically the post interface will line up with the post DTO. So for temporary purposes, I should be able to just return that. Oh, obviously, before I can do anything, I need to import my service. Read only. Post service. All right, so we have our post service. We don't need of anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. All right. Okay, it says that's good. So let's go check it out. Uh-oh, I might have done something wrong. Connection refused. Dun, dun, dun. You know what? I imported the, service HTTP module into the post controller. Into the post module, but perhaps that's not where it belongs. I think that might be, it might belong at the app level. That might be a mistake. And I might have to restart my server. Let's see if this works better. Yeah, it's not happy. Let's just restart to make sure I'm not crazy. I told you there may be slight woes. HTTP service is a provider. Is it part of the current post module? Well, oh, I had it in the controllers array. So I put it in the right spot here, but in the posts module, there's no import section, and I need to add one. I don't know why. I wonder how many people caught that. Always a problem when you do stuff on the fly like this. Okay. That should make it happy. Yep. And then our response. There we go. So what we have now is basically identical to what the placeholder API returns, except it's the new lines aren't in there. But that's fine. Yeah, it's got all 100 of the results. So what we got to do now is do some mapping. We don't want the user ID. We don't want the body. And we only want the newest 10. And one interesting thing you'll notice is that the old items come at the beginning. So we need to grab the last 10 items. So let's think about how we can do this. We're going to use a mapper. And I guess I'll start off by writing that static function to map my post. Let's say map recent posts. So you input a post array and you get back a post DTO array. Okay. So I know I want to reverse so that I get the newest ones first. And let's go ahead and slice the first 10. And then let's map the remaining items. And I'm going to create another static method that's just a little bit different. And it's going to be map recent post. So it takes a single item and returns back the DTO. And here I can just return my object. And in this case, I only want ID and title. All right, so now I have to call this map. So let's map recent post. And now I just have to actually use this in my controller. So we can say we're going to do a pipe and another map. And we're going to use PostMapper. Got to import that. And we're going to map recent posts. And I accidentally have this set to return a single instance, so it should be an array. Did I do that on the... Yep, that should be an array as well. And again, Prettier out of the box doesn't like my formatting, and I like it, so I'm going to ignore it. Let's see if that worked. Oh, that looks good. All right, so we have 100 and title, 99 title, last one should be 91 and title. Perfect. So we got the most recent 10 posts, including only the data that we wanted. So I think that part's done. So let's review it really quickly so you can see what's going on. So we have a post endpoint, and then at that root endpoint, we have a get method called getRecentPosts that calls our service. This goes out and gets the posts and returns an observable of them. We then pipe that and map a response to our mapper. If you're not understanding what's going on with this syntax, it's the same thing as saying something like this. It's just like a shorthand because I don't need any other methods, any other arguments to be passed to the function. I can just pass the function like that by reference. And I usually like to put commas there. Okay. And yeah, the service is making the HTTP request and the mapper's doing the mapping. So I think we're ready for the actual post endpoint now. So we want to get a single post, and we're going to say get post. We're going to need a ID parameter. So in NestJS, you do that with like this, similar to Angular routers, :ID. So at post/ID, And then to get access to that, you can use this param feature and tell it which param you want, because you could have multiple, and then assign that to a variable and give it a type. It's usually going to be a string. If you wanted it to be a number, you could do that and use what's called the parse int pipe to force it to be a number. I'm okay with it just being a string here. I don't need it to be a number, so I'm going to leave it a string for simplicity. And now I'm going to change this to get post, and I'm going to pipe it to map post. So I think this code's done, but we need to actually get these other things built. So let's start with the service. Let's just copy what we had before. And now we need a recent post, and it's going to return a single post. I'm going to change this to use template strings so that I can just do that. And I might need the ID, and I know it's going to be a string. There we go. I think that's done. So get post gets the post, returns the data from Axios. Good to go. And our controller needs the ID. And now we need to define the map post. So it's going to be similar to recent post, except now we want the body. That's really the only difference. If I wanted to be super clean, I could call get recent post here to get the ID and the title, so I'm not duplicating that, and then I could just add the body. Yeah, I'm not worried about that right this moment. In fact, this type of duplication is not bothering me at all, so I think that's fine. It's still, I did something wrong with the type hint, I think. Let's see, observable post. Oh yeah, this still needs to be normal. There we go. All right, I think we're done. Let's go check that out. So if I go get number 99, there we go. I got the body, the ID of 99, the title. So in this case, we've really just stripped out the user ID. Other than that, it's the same as the upstream service when I do a get there. But yeah, it's also minified, so that helps. It's not pretty printed like this, taking up additional bandwidth for spaces or tabs or whatever. But yeah, I think that is it. Like, the project is working. This kind of shows you the use case for why you would want a BFF, and kind of shows you how NestJS works. So I think I said this earlier, but I am going to put this project in its current state up on GitHub. It'll probably be at github.com/jtneal/demo-api. But I'll put a link in the description so you can check that out. But yeah, I think that is it for now. I hope you guys are enjoying this content. I appreciate everybody for watching and staying tuned and listening to my videos and watching my videos. I really do appreciate it. If you're liking the content, don't forget to like it, thumbs up the video, and subscribe. I appreciate every one of you for being with me. This is just a passion project for me. I'm just doing this for fun, not trying to really make anything out of it other than just help people and be a mentor and kind of pass on what I've learned and the things that I enjoy to others. So again, I appreciate it. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time.